Today I'm going to be talking about Chapter 1, Classroom Decision Making and Using Assessment. And since I have the e-text, I'm just going to turn through the pages as we go through my notes. The first thing we talk about is assessment and classroom decisions. And there it says that interviews are included in the broad definition of assessments. Also, assessment results can contribute to a decision, but everyone involved may not interpret the results in the same way. And decisions involve using different kinds of information, and good decisions are based on high quality information. Now, the next thing we talk about is assessment and educational decision about students. And there's no simple answer to the question, is this a good assessment procedure? Because some procedures serve some types of decisions well, but not others. Now, over here, figure 1.1 is a good example, and it tells us the type of educational decisions for which assessments may be used. And I'm going to be bookmarking that page so that I can use it later. Now, the next thing that we talk about is instructional decisions, and it lets us know that there are decisions that we need to make before, during, and after teaching a segment. Now, I can go through the list of questions, but this book just gives us a great amount of questions that we need to be asking ourselves throughout the process, and it also gives us the possible assessment methods. And while I was reading through this, before you need preparation, it said to review syllabuses, review the standards, review statements of goals and learning objectives. So before, you need to review and prepare. Now, during teaching, it said, as I was reading through the text, it says that you need observations. You need to observe, formal or informally, so that you can assess where you need to be with your lesson. And then after teaching a segment, that is when summative assessments come into play. And this is like test or project, homework results, quizzes, tests. So that's what that is. Now, next is instructional diagnosis and remediation, and we learn what a diagnostic assessment is, and that is assessments that provide some of the information needed to make the type of decision to whether or not the student has mastered the learning objective. And then feedback for students, the learners must review both the correct and the incorrect behavior in order to fix it. And then you must give specific guidance to the students about what they need to improve. Students must be able to correct their errors before you go to the next lesson. Now, feedback for the teacher, that lets the teachers know if the students have grasped the information, and if not, you may need to reteach that lesson for them. And then the next section is modeling learning expectations. And this is assessment should embody the learning target. You should be able to compare your current performance with your desired performance. And then here in this little section here, it tells us that assessments can be used to motivate students to study. However, because teachers use pop quizzes and things like that to threaten the students, it has a negative connotation, but we need to try to put a positive motivation to it. And then here on assigning grades to the students, this is where you use summative assessments. And then up here we learn what selective decisions are, and this is where an institution or an organization decides that some people are acceptable whereas others are not. So you're either accepted or rejected. And then here in placement decisions, no one is rejected. However, you're ordered in a certain way. And then over here, classification decisions, you're not ordered and you're not rejected. So basically you are put, you're assigned to several different unordered categories. So that's how we remember that. So unordered, ordered, accepted, or rejected. And then the next thing is counseling and guidance decisions, and it lets us know that we need a series of information and assessments in order to do that for them. And then here we learn what credentializing is, and that is where a person has met a specific requirement and is awarded a certain status and given a credential. And they can be state mandated or voluntary. And it is unjust if the student did not have the opportunity to learn the material, whereas if the teacher didn't cover that. And then up here we learn about data-driven decision making, and that is where you analyze, interpret, or use data in a manner that contributes to improve instruction and increase learning. And then down here we learn about the distinctions between assessments, tests, measurements, and evaluations. Assessment is a broad term defined as a process for obtaining information and for making decisions. And then it tells us that there are 5 guiding principles that will help you select and use educational assessments meaningfully, and I will be sure to note these. And then we move on to tests. We learn about tests when my computer loads. And that is an instrument or systematic procedure for observing and describing one or more characteristics of a student using either a numerical scale or a classification scheme. So, it's more narrow than an assessment, and it's used for individuals and schools in general. And then over here we learn about measurement, and it's a procedure for assigning numbers to a specific attribute of a characteristic of a person in such a way that the numbers describe the degree to which a person possesses the attribute. Now this actually maintains the order that exists in the real world among the people being measured. And over here is an evaluation, and it's the process of making a value judgment about the worth of a student's product or performance. And then as we move on, we learn that formative and summative evaluations are important, and formative is during the design or development of an instructional materials, and this one, summative, is after it's already completed. Now the evaluation for students, formative and summative should be based on the same intended learning outcomes. So the formative, the student is still in the process of learning, and then summative is after the learning is done. And then we have a vocabulary word here, sizing up, which means to form a general impression of a student's strengths, weaknesses, learning characteristics, etc. And then as we move on, there's high stakes assessment and accountability, and it just lets us to know, be aware of external assessment programs. And then as we move into high stakes testing, it starts talking about No Child Left Behind, and it also says that high stakes testing is used to make decisions that result in serious consequences if the goal is not met. And then accountability testing, assessment that is used to hold individual students or school officials responsible for ensuring that the students meet the state standards. And then here is actually a section about No Child Left Behind, and it said that the loss of federal education funds if the state cannot provide the demonstration results. So if you could not provide what No Child Left Behind wanted you to, see a state's failure to provide results in a loss. So then we talk about the standards-based proficiency requirements, and we talk about content standards, and that's about the subject matter of that the students are expected to learn, whereas up here, performance standards are the things students can perform once the content standards are learned. And then we move on to high-stakes sanctions, and it's still talking about No Child Left Behind, and it said that these are the things right here, that these numbered things, are the things that the school had to do in order to apply for a waiver, because it is impossible for a student or for a school to have 100% of their students pass and meet these goals. And then as we move on, we go to assessment of students. Disaggregation. And that just tells us that the test results for the population of students are separated in order to report on individual subgroups. And that just says that the federal government wants to ensure that states are accountable for all students learning the challenging state standards. So that just keeps the schools in check. And then as we move to students with disabilities, it tells us that now they have a little more flexibility in the adjusting the contents and performance standards. And then as it's summing up, it's talking about issues in the current accountability climate. And it says that No Child Left Behind is controversial, and it's inevitable corruption of test scores right here when stakes are high, including the narrowing of the curriculum to easily tested objectives whenever the focus of the school is on improving test scores. So that is just a concern to have in the back of your mind. But then it talks down here about how we are switching to Common Core assessments. And then it also said as tests become more rigorous, pass rates will decline initially. And I hope that's only initially. I hope it doesn't stay that way. And I really enjoyed the chapter, and I learned so much. And thank you for listening. And by the way, if you're wondering, this is Monica. Even though it says Jenny up here, I'm borrowing her ebook because my textbook has not came in yet. Okay, thanks.